Welcome back to the Empire Wellness Podcast. Today, we are talking about how to stuff your face the right way. So, we're going to talk about proper nutrition. Let's dive right in. I'm going to go over the basics of proper nutrition. I know that there is so much contradictory information out there, and you might be getting very contradictory information about what to eat, when to eat, all of that stuff, even from your doctor or doctors. And that's because unless it's a passion of theirs, unless it's something that they really enjoy studying, most doctors don't know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to nutrition anyway, because they received very little nutrition education in school. They were mostly taught how to diagnose, how to use pharmaceuticals or surgical interventions to treat, and they weren't taught these quote alternative ways to treat disease and help people thrive. So, the basics we're going to cover today are macronutrients, macros meaning big, micronutrients, micros meaning small. We're going to talk about whole food, not the big grocery store down the street. We're also going to talk about times to eat and when it may or may not be useful to restrict your eating times. And then finally, we're going to go over some helpful tips. So let's go over macronutrients. Macro just meaning big. There are three macronutrients. We have proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Oftentimes we shorten it to say carbs. Our proteins include meat proteins, protein from nuts, protein from beans and legumes. Protein comes from eggs and also dairy. Let's break these down a little bit. Not all meat is created equal. If it's in your budget, I highly recommend going for the organic. If it's going to be beef, reach for grass-fed, grass-finished. We'll touch on that a little bit later. I'll deepen your knowledge on that shortly. Chickens are scrawny little birds. If you are buying chicken breasts that each breast is like a pound, that is not a healthy or normal chicken. It's probably loaded with tons of hormones to get that chicken to grow huge. And it's probably not providing a lot of nutrient density in that protein anyway. So, as best you can, get that organic, healthy, grass-fed, grass-finished meat as best you can. Nuts aren't always nuts. Peanuts. That's where my mind used to go when I would think of a nut. But a peanut is not a nut. It's a legume. It's improperly named. And unfortunately, peanuts actually are very toxic with mold. Tons and tons of mold in peanuts and peanut butter in the United States. At least I think it's all over the world. It's just, it breeds mold very easily. And organic peanuts and peanut butter is even worse. It has no mold fighting properties in the organic. So I avoid peanuts and peanut butter going forward because it's just not beneficial for our bodies. Other nuts, almonds, cashews, there's information out there that says these are bad too. I have yet to give up some of the other nuts, almonds, cashews, pine nuts, macadamia nuts, all of those things, only because the data is conflicting. So take what you will. It is high in protein, high in fat, healthy proteins, healthy fats. Beans and legumes actually fall into two categories. They're proteins and they're carbohydrates. They're 2/3 carbohydrate and 1/3 protein. So know that when you're playing around with your macronutrient balance, if you are trying to go for a lower carbohydrate diet, which is what I recommend for a lot of people, then beans and legumes are not going to be high on the list of foods you should be eating. Plus, they tend to come with another component called lectin, Lectin. And lectins can really settle in the joints and be very inflammatory for a lot of people. So if you tend to eat beans and you notice that your joints are achy the next day, or red wine especially is very high in lectins as well. So if you drink a glass of wine and you're very headachy and very achy in your joints the next day, then you probably have a problem with lectins. And in that case, need to avoid beans and legumes. Eggs. Eggs are excellent sources of protein and healthy fat. So they hit up two macronutrients, and eggs are great. I think they are a powerhouse food. They have no contribution to heart disease and high cholesterol. Don't listen to that old junk. I have a previous podcast episode on cholesterol. So if you need to go back and brush up on your cholesterol knowledge, hit up that episode. And eggs are a huge, huge source of protein, healthy, awesome protein. I do recommend you stick to those pasture raised brands. So as long as the box of eggs says pasture raised, when you crack that egg open, absolutely eat the yolks. They should be a deep, rich yellow or orange color. And that means that you know that you got a good quality egg from a healthy, happy chicken. Dairy. Dairy can also be a great source of protein as well as fat, healthy fat, as long as your body can tolerate it. Dairy is one of the highest allergen foods in modern times because it's heavily processed. It goes through the pasteurization process, and it's no longer raw and useful. So if you can tolerate it, by all means, enjoy some dairy for some healthy proteins and healthy fats. Fats. Where does fat come from? Healthy fats. Again, not all fats are created equal. Saturated fat is actually really great for us. Trans fat, bad news bears. You want to avoid those types of unhealthy fats. So where should you be getting your fat? Butter, lard, which is the fat that comes from pigs. Tallow comes from beef and other ruminants like bison. And then avocado. Avocado is a fruit. It's an amazing source of fat, and it also has some fiber built in because it's a fruit. So really stick to those types of fats. And then the last type of fat, the great way to get fats, healthy fats, is from oils. And again, not all oils are created equal. I recommend that people stick with avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil if it is not heated. So raw olive oil, if you're going to put that on a salad dressing, anything like that. Those are some really amazing healthy oils with healthy fats that you can get. You're going to want to avoid the canola oil, corn oil, vegetable oil, any nut or seed oils. So sunflower, palm oil, all of these can be very damaging to the body's very inflammatory. So avoid those seed oils, vegetable oils, that kind of stuff. Avoid that. Stick to butter, grass-fed butter, and lard, tallow, avocado. Those are the good ones. Now, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates come from grains. Grains could be breads, gluten, cereals. Some are better than others. And there actually happen to be a decent amount of carbs in both fruits and vegetables. So some have more than others. And then beans and legumes, again, remember I said 2/3 carb, 1/3 protein. So for any vegetarians out there who are using beans and legumes as a major protein source, just know that you're actually getting double the amount of carbohydrates for the protein that you're getting. That's okay, as long as you're not having to stick to a low carb diet. If it works for your body, great. Many people, that doesn't work for. We need to reduce our carbs oftentimes to either get weight off, decrease inflammation, or just recover from something that is going on in our body. And so if that's the case, beans and legumes probably aren't going to be a great solution for you. We get carbohydrates from corn and any other like corn oil, canola oil, any of that, that's going to have carbs in it. It's not just the fat. And then sugar. Sugar is a big main source of carbohydrate. It is highly processed. It's hard to break down in the body. It causes insulin spikes. It can cause insulin resistance, diabetes, all of these problems. And any carbohydrate in too high a quantity can cause diabetes and insulin resistance because those carbs are turned into glucose, which is sugar. And so making sure you kind of keep an eye on what you're eating. If all you eat is pasta and bread and fried foods, you're probably getting an overload of carbohydrates. And I touched on fruits and vegetables also contain carbohydrates. These carbohydrates tend to be easier on the digestive system because they come packed full of fiber as well. So what I prefer to get my carbs from fruits and vegetables rather than these other sources. Micronutrients, micro, tiny. There's a few categories here as well. We have vitamins. We have minerals, which I like to call electrolytes because we've kind of called them that over time, and then it classifies them slightly differently from the trace minerals. So vitamins are things that we're very well equipped to understand. That's B12, other B vitamins. We have 3, 6, 9, 5. There's I think 15 of them or something like that. For women who still have a cycle, B vitamins are super important. And for any woman who has taken hormonal birth control before, that depletes us of our B vitamins. So those need to be replenished as well. Or if you continue to take hormone birth control, then make sure you're taking a high quality B vitamin supplement to go along with that depletion that the birth control is causing. We have our fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. They are all important. You should take them all together. You should find a supplement, a fat soluble vitamin supplement that has A, D, E, and K all in one shot. D and K really need to be taken together. They're very supportive of one another. And actually, all 4 of those fat soluble vitamins support one another. They are fat soluble. They are called that for a reason, meaning they absorb with fat. So if the vitamins that you're taking, let's say you're taking vitamin D, that's a really common one that our doctors will run on a basic blood panel. And if you are taking a vitamin D supplement because maybe your vitamin D came back low and it doesn't have a delivery method with fat, it doesn't have like an MCT oil delivery. The vitamin D supplement that I recommend to my patients and that I take myself is in a liquid solution that has MCT oil. Don't worry about the naming of that. Just know that it is a healthy fat. So if you're taking a vitamin D supplement that doesn't have a delivery in a healthy fat oil, then make sure that you are taking it with a healthy fat, such as avocado. And then we all know about vitamin C, and there are many, many other vitamins out there. These are essential to a healthy body. So make sure that you are getting vitamins in your food. We have electrolytes like sodium, chlorine, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. To me, in my opinion, if there is one supplement out there that every single person, at least in the United States, every single one of us needs to take, that is a magnesium supplement. I'm going to link up a link in the show notes with a coupon code that you can use to order my favorite brand of magnesium. It's sitting, if you're watching the video, it's just sitting, oh, if I can point, on the shelf right behind me. I always have it in stock for my patients. You can order from anywhere in the United States and have it shipped directly to you. So I will link that up for my magnesium breakthrough supplement in the show notes. And magnesium is so great. It supports healthy bones. It's great for women after menopause. It's good for muscle spasms. It helps treat cardiac issues. So it helps you keep a healthy heart. It helps you keep a healthy, focused brain. man, there is nothing that magnesium can't do. In my opinion, it is an integral supplement. I love it. And then we have our trace minerals. These are things like boron, zinc, iron, copper, molybdenum, and manganese. These are things that we need in very low quantities, and we should be getting from the foods that we eat because those foods are absorbed through the soil. Unfortunately, all of this stuff, all of these micronutrients are no longer getting into our diets the natural way through our actual diet because the soil has been so depleted of nutrients for nearly 100 years now. This is in the United States. Um, the soil just is lacking. So the plants that we eat aren't absorbing those micronutrients into them to pass on as we eat them. The animals that are eating the grass that's in the soil that should have the nutrients aren't absorbing those nutrients because it's just not there. And so we do really need to supplement with any of these vitamins, micronutrients. Let's talk about whole food, not the grocery store, not the one that costs exorbitant amounts of money, although it's warranted because they tend to carry pretty darn high quality stuff. We're talking about whole food in that it's as close to nature as possible. So I touched on this earlier when we were talking about the macronutrients. When it comes to proteins, to meats, you want to stick with grass fed and grass finished if possible. It's a little tough to find. And I will tell you, there is some interesting research out there that grass fed, grain finished meats are actually just as healthy and are really not causing many noticeable problems in people's bodies. What does grass fed, grass finished, grain finished, what does all this mean? Grass fed means that the cows are eating their normal diet. They are supposed to eat grass. They have ridiculous amounts of stomachs because they can actually process and break down all of that fiber that we cannot. And so when they eat grass, that's their natural diet. It's how they've been roaming the lands for millions of years. Grass finished means that they are fed grass their entire life all the way up to slaughter. Now, when they're grain finished, that just means that in the last months leading up to when the cow goes to slaughter, they're fed grains to allow them to plump a little bit bigger so that it'll provide meals for more people. Now, again, there is some interesting research that shows that grass finished versus grain finished really isn't necessarily causing problems in people's bodies when we consume them. However, if they are grain fed their whole lives and they're on these awful industrialized farms, I don't even know how they call it a farm because there's no grass in sight. It's just dirt and mud and muck that these poor cows are walking in and living in. That's not a real farm, in my opinion. And those animals are fed grains and maybe God knows what else to keep them super fat, make them grow really big, really fast, so that they can turn these cows over and make a bigger profit. That's what I want you to avoid is those industrialized, conventionally raised cows. The next best thing if you can't find or can't afford the grass-fed, grass-finished meats, then I want you to stick with organic. It's at least that they're fed organic foods and it's still better on the scale compared to, again, those industrially raised cows. Eggs, we talked about pasture raised. You want it to specifically say pasture raised on the egg carton because if it says cage free, that's kind of deceiving. What tends to happen when they're quote cage free eggs is they could be in a giant warehouse. They're still pumped full of a bunch of gunk. to grow huge. I mean, some of these chickens are so large that their little tiny scrawny legs can't support their bodies. And so they just crush under the weight of their huge bodies and they just sit there with nothing to do. Just because they're not in a cage doesn't mean they have a wonderful life, doesn't mean that it's healthy. So when you are picking eggs, when you're picking chicken, you want them to be pasture raised. If you're buying chicken, like I said before, if you buy a pack of chicken and one whole breast is a half a pound, three-quarters of a pound, that was not a real chicken. That was some mutant crazy chicken that they hopped up on a bunch of steroids and other crap to make it big. It's not going to serve your body. Dairy, we want to stick with raw or whole milk. So as little processed as possible. Sometimes it's a little difficult to find raw milk. I know in the state of California, I don't think it's legal to sell raw milk at markets any longer. So it can be hard to find. Check the laws where you're at. And goat and sheep dairy can be really good for people. A lot of times people who have a hard time handling regular dairy, cow's milk, cow's cheese, are fine with goat milk or goat cheese or sheep or even camel. There's camel dairy out there that you can get your hands on. So when I talk about eating whole food, not the grocery store, but eating that real food as close to nature as possible. If you can think pre-industrial revolution, so thinking a couple hundred years ago, before we had all the factories, all the factory farming, all of that stuff, think back to how maybe your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, how they were eating. And if you can adopt eating styles like them, then you are doing a great job and that will serve your body. So let's talk about time-restricted eating, which is also called intermittent fasting. Fasting and intermittent fasting, there are so many buzzwords around this now. And just like everything else, it is different for every body. Every person does different with different things, different resources. If you tend to have low blood sugar, if you're dizzy, if you are hungry and shaking, if you're hangry, doing time restricted eating may not be for you. If you are insulin resistant or even have diabetes that is well managed, make sure you check your blood sugars. You might benefit greatly from intermittent fasting. It may really serve your body and reverse the insulin resistance, reverse the diabetes. It's very possible to do. So I recommend playing around with it. Now, if you're a man, then you should be able to do any kind of fasting or intermittent fasting pretty easily. You just have to get rid of the little hungry gremlin. There's a protein in our bodies, not a protein, it's a hormone in our bodies called ghrelin. And so I like to call it our little hunger gremlin. And that ghrelin is what signals to our brain, hey, I'm hungry, let's eat some food. So it takes a few days to kind of get past that little hunger gremlin. And once you do, then you're able to fast pretty easily in a pretty healthy way. So men, it's pretty simple for you. Go ahead and play around with it. I'll give you a couple tips in a minute and what you can try. Women, it's very different for us. If you still have a cycle, absolutely no fasting or intermittent fasting while you have your cycle, while you're bleeding. Avoid that. It's not helpful. You need extra protein at this time of month. If you're in menopause and you haven't had a cycle for a long time, your body operates similar to a man, but not the same. So you can absolutely try intermittent fasting and see what works for you. The interesting thing is we still tend to be kind of cyclical. So play around with it, give it a few weeks, usually 4 to 6 weeks, to see when the intermittent fasting or fasting is helping your body and when it's not. And again, women who still have a cycle, you can fast 3 weeks out of the month, 1 week out of the month. Make sure that you are getting regular meals. What's the difference between fasting and intermittent fasting? Fasting could be a long time. It could be a 4-day fast. It could be a 40-day fast. If you're going to do anything longer than 4 days, I highly recommend doing it under the direction of a licensed medical professional who can really pay attention to your vitals, make sure everything is working for you, and making sure that you're still staying hydrated. So you can fast for a day. There is a type of fasting called OMAD, and it just stands for 1 meal a day, OMAD, OMAD. And you're basically fasting 23 hours, and then you have a 1 hour eating window. An OMAD style eating window or an OMAD diet for men tends to be really fantastic, especially if you're over the age of 40, 45, 50, somewhere kind of in that middle age range. It can be really beneficial for you. And then intermittent fasting, which OMAD is a type of intermittent fasting, really just means that you have a shortened eating window and a longer fasting window. A lot of people out there are saying you should do a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour eating window. It doesn't have to be that. When I work with patients to help them fast and try intermittent fasting, I recommend they start with 12 hours of eating time, 12 hours of fasting, which most of us fast for a good 6 to 8 hour period while we sleep. So that's a huge chunk of your fasting window already right there. So if you're brand new to this fasting idea and you want to give it a try, start off with a 12-hour fasting window, a 12-hour eating window. Now, during that 12-hour eating window, you aren't just eating constantly for 12 hours. No, it's just you might have your meals in that 12-hour period. I like to get to either a 14-hour fasting window or a 16-hour fasting window, but sometimes people do 20. Sometimes it's a 20-hour fasting window and a 4-hour eating period where they might have, a snack and a meal or 2 small meals during that 4 hours. Play around with it, see what feels best for you. And most importantly, this is not dogma. You don't have to do the same exact thing every single day. If you are hungry one morning, you might have had poor sleep. You might have had an intense workout the day before. Maybe you ate carbohydrates too late in the evening and your body is telling you, hey, I'm hungry. Pay attention to the signals and give your body what it needs. If you are tired and lethargic and you just need more and more coffee so you can get through that next 2 hours until your eating window begins, that is a sign that your fast has gone on too long and it's time to break your fast. So let's cover a few tips. Number 1, shop the perimeter of the grocery store. If you've listened to other episodes, you've heard me say this before. If I could give one tip to everybody out there on how to be healthier, it would be to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. Avoid those center aisles. Avoid the processed foods. You want to fuel your body with real food, with whole food, and that is on the perimeter of the grocery store. Your meats, eggs, dairy if you can tolerate it, and produce. That is where you want to keep your grocery shopping. Just that one tip, if you make one switch, just that switch will transform your health. Next tip. Always, I will repeat this, always break your fast with protein and fat. In my opinion, eggs are the perfect breakfast. It provides protein, healthy fats, and especially if you're buying those pasture-raised eggs, that deep golden color of the yolk is giving you so many vital nutrients that you need and your body needs. Always break your fast with protein, and fat. I don't care how long you're fasting for. If you're eating late into the night and you're saying, that fasting stuff, that intermittent fasting stuff just isn't for me, Charlene, totally fine. But we all fast. We all fast while we sleep. Sometimes, if we are busy and forget to have lunch or we decide to skip lunch, you might be fasting from breakfast until dinner. So, whenever it is that you're going to break your fast, any fast, I want you to break it with protein and fats. On the flip side, never, 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 never break your fast with carbohydrates or sugar. Carbs turn into sugar, and you do not want to break your fast with sugar. You want to avoid breaking your fast with sugar and carbohydrates. Cereal, horrible, horrible option. Donuts, terrible option. Pancakes, not a great idea. So avoid breaking your fast with carbohydrates and sugar. The next tip I have is to finish your evening meal at least 3 hours before you go to bed. And I said, finish your evening meal at least 3 hours before you go to bed. So if you go to bed at 10, then you want to finish eating no later than 7. You want to have that 3-hour window where you're still up, you're still moving. Even if you're sitting on the couch, you're still semi upright. That way, your body has time to process your food. I will admit, this is the one area that I really struggle with. That's because I work with patients till late in the evening. And so I get home at a later time of day, and I typically don't have enough time to finish eating before it's time to get ready to go to bed. So this is the one area that I am constantly working on to improve, because it really can disrupt your sleep. You don't want your body, when it's supposed to be in rest and digest mode, to be trying to work on digesting all of that heavy food. So, a workaround to this, if you are like me and just can't get home in time to have an earlier meal, then have a lighter meal for dinner. That way, your body isn't struggling so much while it's trying to rest to process all of your food. And the final tip that I have for you guys today is to start with your blood type. I have people all the time ask me, gosh, Arlene, there's just so much information out there. There's the vegan diet, the paleo diet, there's keto. What should I be doing and following? First of all, every single one of these diets has a healthy basis in science. There is good science around all of these options. It's just not for every single body. So I recommend that people start with their blood type. There's a great book about there called, I think it's called Start With Your Type. And it is about the 4 blood types and which blood types are supported by what foods. That is always the best place to start. Again, nothing is one size fits all. There's not a perfect diet for every single person. So you need to see what works for you. And if that's different from what works with your family, then let's find ways to get you guys to integrate with one another so that everybody is eating a healthy plan. All right, that is all I have for you today. As always, if you need me, please reach out. The information is in the show notes below, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Be well.